God's covenant with Abraham forms the basis for the very existence and purpose of the kingdom. Thus it answers, why the kingdom? Although the details of this covenant were presented to Abraham progressively in multiple conversations with God, and God did not officially institute the covenant until Genesis 15, the basics are found in God's announcement in Genesis 12, 1 through 3. Get out of your country, from where your family and from your father's house, to a land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great. And you shall be a blessing, and I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. In this statement, God gave one very specific promise. I will make you a great nation. A nation is a large body of people associated with a particular territory that is sufficiently conscious of its unity to seek or to possess a government peculiarly its own. Even without the other details that God would provide later, surely these were the same basic assumptions that Abraham would have made based on the promises of a great nation. First, a nation requires people, and a great nation requires a great number of people. Abraham was born between the end of the Akkadian Empire and the emergence of the Sumerian Empire, both of which had large urban centers. He would have understood a great nation to consist of at least hundreds of thousands of citizens. This must mean more than Abraham becoming the leader of a great nation. The Hebrew verb does not allow for God to simply make a great nation for Abraham, but that God would make Abraham himself into that great nation. In other words, this great nation and all its people would have to be connected biologically to Abraham. Second, a nation needs a physical territory to call home. Every civilization must have a place for its base of operations, a place for its citizens to live and work. Land ownership, battles, and border disputes are consistently among the leading causes of civil and multinational wars, and the search for more or certain land is often a key component. Third, a nation needs a government to rule its people. In Abraham's experience, he would have understood this to be a dynasty, monarchy, with localized control at the city-state levels. It seems that a king sitting in a capital city, exercising sovereign power over his whole empire, was the only type of government the world of Abraham's day had truly known. Even our modern representation of government follows this pattern to an extent. A nation requires cohesive government to operate successfully, and this has historically been accomplished by a strong ruler who can squelch those who would rebel against him. A fourth characteristic of a nation had in Abraham's world was a common religion. Although many people today have difficulty with the concept of a national religion, this was normal in every ancient civilization. The idea of a nation with no supernatural power was a foolish one indeed. How could such a nation survive against her enemies, each of which often had many gods to protect them? Even Abraham grew up worshiping the Akkadian moon god, Sin. Religious life was powerful in ancient cultures because kings would often promote themselves and their families either as deities or as priests and priestesses to the gods. Religion and government were often inseparable. Thus, when God promised that he would make Abraham a great nation, Abraham would have understood it to mean far more than a big family, but rather an organized monarchy, large enough number of citizens existing within relatively fixed geographical boundaries, all sharing a common form of worship. The other three kingdom covenants prove that Abraham's natural understanding is exactly what God intended and still intends to bring about. The land covenant. As noted, a nation needs its own territory or land in which to settle. Within 10 years after Abraham moved from Haran, God gave him his next piece of the puzzle. The land covenant, often wrongly called Palestinian covenant, answers the second basic question: where is the kingdom? Unless the kingdom is viewed as a literal entity, this question does not even matter. Yeshua was clear, and one day he would come in his glory. and will sit on the throne of his glory. Matthew 25, verse 31. Where will this throne be located? In Genesis 15, God restated his promise to give Abraham many descendants, this time pointing to the stars as an illustration of their number. At this point, God had Abraham make preparations for the ceremony to confirm the covenant. During this ceremony, God revealed that Abraham's descendants would be enslaved and oppressed for 400 years. But afterward, God would personally rescue them and return them to the land he had promised to them. Specifically, God promised this: "To your descendants I have given this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates. The Canaanites, Kenizites, the Kadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaim, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Geshurites, and the Jebusites." It seemed that their exodus from Egypt had followed this promise. However, God brought the infant nation of Israel to the border of their new home, only to have them run in fear when they saw the land filled with warriors and fortified cities. As punishment for the rebellion, God made them live as nomads for nearly 40 years until the entire generation of over 603,000 men had died. Upon bringing them back to the place where they would enter the land to conquer it, God promised the people great blessing if they would obey him and great destruction if they disobeyed. Part of that destruction would be the temporary loss of their control over that land. However, couched within the conditional aspects of their well-being, God emphasized the unconditional nature of his covenant with Abraham in saying, "If any of you are driven out to the farthest parts under heaven, from there the Lord your God will gather you, and from there he will bring you. Then the Lord your God will bring you to the land which your fathers possessed, and you shall possess it. He will prosper you and multiply you more than your fathers." True to God's word, Israel repeatedly rebelled and faced divine punishment, including her exile to Assyria and Babylon. Yet throughout Israel's rebellion, the prophets continued to promise her future restoration. Most notable is the promise repeated in Jeremiah 16, 14 through 15, and 23, 7 through 8, in which God said of the coming restoration will be so amazing that people will stop using the miracle at the Red Sea as the celebration of God's power in favor of this dramatic restoration.